On the spot tonight is someone you'd read a whole lot of. Thomas Friedman would certainly put out compelling arguments about what's happening in the political world, how is Obama faring, or how is the economic crisis proving to be. Tonight, he's on the spot with us. Thomas Friedman, thanks so much for joining us live from Washington, D.C. We'll start with your hypothesis on global warming in the book, the most recent book that you've had, which is Hot, Flat and Crowded. You argue that destabilization of market and Mother Nature are really the same things, and they both are intrinsically linked. How?
Well, basically, we've been behaving, in both the market and Mother Nature with the same accounting. That is, we allowed people to massively underprice risk, privatize gains, and socialize losses. So in the market, in the American market, we allowed people to massively underprice the risk of subprime mortgages. We allowed the people who did that to privatize their gains. And then when they blew up, we socialized the losses on the back of every American taxpayer. We do the same in Mother Nature. We allow people to massively underprice the risk of emitting carbon molecules. We allow them to privatize the gains from cheap coal, cheap oil, gas, and we are now socializing the losses in the form of carbon molecules in the atmosphere, which we are charging on our children's Visa cards and will come back in the future as climate change.
It doesn't particularly paint a very good picture of human beings and our insatiable thirst for basically taking everything out of our planet. Thomas, though, what can one do with this grasshopper generation, which basically, as you point out, squandered most of the world's natural resources?
Well, our children are going to be very mad at us unless we, the grasshopper generation, who ate through all the abundance that the greatest generation gave us, unless we become the regeneration and really pursue more sustainable policies in both the market and Mother Nature.
Right, Mother Nature, and you said your children are going to be really unhappy with everyone out here. In the same context, look at India, even China. It isn't sort of seeing quite a long process of what you're calling privatization of gains and socializing of losses. Somewhere, India and China are also to blame.
Well, there's no question. When I say I don't expect India to take a different trajectory, all I'm saying is that I understand that, when you're trying to grow people's incomes from $500 per capita income to $1,500, that the priority of climate change is not going to be what it is in a fully developed country. That said, I think India is missing something that China does understand, which is that the ability to outgreen your competition, the ability to actually have lower energy and cleaner energy costs. After all, pollution is waste. Okay, that's what all that smoke, black smoke going up into the atmosphere represents, is actually a sustainable competitive advantage. And I think India needs to be aware that the most important thing that happened in the world between 2008 and 2010 was not the subprime crisis. It was that China decided to go green. Not because they read me or Al Gore or anybody else. China decided to go green out of necessity because more and more Chinese could not breathe, could not drink, could not drive, could not swim, could not fish. And when China decides to go green out of necessity, watch out. Because you won't just be importing your toys from China. You'll be importing your next electric car, car battery, solar panel, and wind turbine. China last year became the world's largest manufacturer of both wind turbines and solar panels.
In fact, Thomas, I live in one of the least green cities in the world where pollution is a big problem. Will the biggest challenge of sustainability then be consensus?
I think it'll be consensus building. It always is when you ask people to do something less of something or pay something more for something. That's a leadership question, and what I'm saying is that it has to be framed not just as a question of sacrifice, but as investment in the next great global industry. In a world that's growing from 6.7 billion people to 9.2 billion people, the notion that clean power, clean tech, clean water, and clean energy aren't going to be the next great global industry is nuts. They are going to be the next great global industry. There's only one question: who's going to own it? Who's going to lead it?
Okay, who's going to own it or who's going to lead it? I'm going to just shift gears a little bit. Tom, just look at globalization in the post-recovery or post-crisis scenario. Has your view on globalization changed? Do you think world being flat is a bit of a virtue?
Well, you know, I never thought it was a virtue. I thought it was a reality. And my argument in my books was that it is the reality. It's as much a reality as the sun, you know, rising in the morning. The question is, how do you deal with it? And my argument was that you need to get the best out of it, because there are best things to get out of it, and to cushion the worst. I still believe that today. Globalization, in some ways, transmitted this economic crisis faster than ever, and at the same time, it's helped lift us out of it faster than ever, thanks to growth in countries like India and China and Brazil.
You know, in regards to protectionism, Thomas, everyone's to blame. India, China, United States, you name it, everyone would like to protect their businesses. How do you read into protectionism being glorified by nations?
Well, I just think that's nuts, you know, frankly. In a world that is increasingly without walls, trying to hide behind walls is a losing strategy. The right strategy is to educate your people, enable, empower, and strengthen them to compete in a world with no walls. That's my philosophy.
Tom, look at the new world going to be led by a different set of ideas, perhaps even business ideas. If 2000 to 2010 have been about technology, high speed, what's the next decade about? What's the buzzword that might actually stick around?
I think that there's a word that you are going to hear in the next decade that you hadn't heard in the previous decade, and that is sustainable. Sustainable values. We in America really have gone through a decade of what I call situational values. You did whatever the situation allowed. Hey, if the situation allowed me to extend a mortgage on a $750,000 home to a worker who made $15,000 a year, I did it because the situation allowed it. Sustainable values would tell me I shouldn't. Situationally, if I could plow up acres of the Amazon, turn them into soybeans farms, and export all the soybeans to China, situationally I could do that. Sustainable values tell me I shouldn't. And I think what we are going to see in a world of growing populations, in a world that's getting hot, flat, and crowded, is, I hope, a greater respect, elevation, and promotion of what I call the values of sustainability in both the market and Mother Nature.